need to focus on what are the good things we want to keep. And we've demonstrated in government that making decisions quickly but not perfectly is possible, and that you can reduce time and red tape. So they're the good things we want to keep. And I think the other good things that we want to keep are realising what is core to our business, what is core to what is important to people, and really shedding things that are unnecessary. So people have been doing that as a household or as individuals. Companies have been doing that in terms of the decisions they've had to take, and certainly governments are doing that as well. We are in New South Wales. So any input the Committee for Sydney has in that process would be highly valued. But as you appreciate, we have pushed the envelope in terms of getting hospitality and tourism back up and running, and as well as making sure we sustainably reopen and re-engage the economy. Having said that, one thing I do want to make people feel confident about is our infrastructure pipeline, because building things equals jobs, and we're not going to touch that part of our budget. So it's really important that the capital projects that we have, that they will continue. But obviously there is a lot of pressure on the other side of our budget, which is the day-to-day expenses, and that's what we need to monitor. So I might just leave my comments there and just see what questions or what's of interest to committee members, and then I'll address them as best I can. So thanks, Gabrielle.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. All right, and there are almost 500 people on the line, so the people are interested in what you have to say, and that means I'll do my best to get through people's questions. Starting with a question about leadership, what have you learned during this experience? And then an interesting question: what political leaders around the world do you especially admire or think have done a good job with this that you've noticed?
Well, I think firstly, it's too early to really make a judgment call, because we're still going through the pandemic, and all of us will be judged in a year and a half's time. So I think it's really too soon to make any decisions on that. But there are some nations that have done, certainly much better than others to date. But I feel what life and death decision making occurs during a crisis like this means that you govern or you lead with little regard as to what people think. You automatically just lead in terms of, well, what is the best thing to do? What is the right decision to do? And in the normal course of leadership, especially if you're managing a government, you do worry about what certain groups of people may think, or how the commentators might react to what you're saying. But it's almost like, and I think I mentioned this in a TV interview I did, it's almost like, when you dance like nobody's watching, it's almost like leading without any inhibition and making decisions that are completely in the best interests of the community, which sounds easy and trite, but in reality is very difficult. But in a pandemic, it's much easier. So you can, because it's life and death, I didn't really care about what people thought of me personally. I just thought, well, I know what decision I have to take, and I've just got to do it. And I also felt confident because I have a wonderful team of people around me, whether it's colleagues, whether it's health experts, and whether it's key stakeholders, and also having the courage to ask for help when you need it. So I went outside of government. I lent on the private sector to help me with procurement of medical supplies. I lent on the private sector to help us with data management and data inputs and what was important to look at in terms of trends. And they were able to give me, through their global contacts, really good intel and insights into what certain data would tell us about future projections in terms of case numbers, but also in terms of what impact things could have on the community. So I think what I've learned during this process is have no to little regard on what people will think. Just make sure you do the right thing, because you're privy to information other people aren't. And secondly, don't be afraid to go to the most brilliant person you think lives in your state and ask them for help, because everybody's been so obliging, and so I've been shameless in doing that. And I think that goes the same for anybody. It's don't be afraid to ask the best person or the smartest person in a particular industry or field to help you, because people have been amazing during this time.
Yeah, people have really pulled together. All right, some notes of gratitude for the Cultural Renewal Fund for the Arts and announcing the galleries can open. But a question building on that, what what role do you see for the arts in assisting the economic recovery?
Oh, a huge one. And I think as soon as it's safe to do so, because I think all of us will be traveling around Australia much more, and we'll be welcoming tourists from other states. And I think exposing what we have here in New South Wales to our fellow Australians will be a wonderful opportunity, and also to our friends across the ditch. So I think there are enormous opportunities in that sector. And once we get to a stage where we can work out what is a viable and safe way to have people physically present, is really important. But also I know that a lot of companies, a lot of arts institutions and companies are taking innovative ways in which they can present their area of expertise. And certainly having the cultural institutions reopen helps. Galleries and the like are one of the few places on the planet where you're not allowed to touch anything when you go in anyway. So it's actually a very safe space, so long as you manage the crowds and do things in a safe way. So in terms of performance arts and creative arts, it's actually a bit more challenging, but we have an interim package which will help companies survive until we get to a safe space where we can open up for performances. And I don't think that's too far off, to be honest. And I also appreciate sometimes that the most brilliant performances to be part of are more intimate. So there's lots of ways in which we can support those organisations in their innovation. And I have confidence that more than ever, people crave that nurturing of the soul, whether it's through performance or music or visual arts or creative arts. And I think being stuck at home has really made people appreciate what nurtures them. And I think the arts will have a fantastic rebound, to be honest. I think they'll come out stronger, and people will use this time to really focus on how the role that arts and culture has in a society. And we're there every step of the way to support the sector in doing that.
Premier, many people have found that while they've been home, they have rediscovered their local high street, their local main street, and there's been a bit of a renaissance of appreciating the local parks and what people have in their neighborhood. The downside has been that the CBD is quite impacted. And the CBD is the lifeblood of a modern knowledge economy, where you bring the largest concentration of great minds together, and all kinds of businesses, and the magic of the city is on display. How can we bring back the CBD, particularly when people are afraid to go on public transport, and no CBD can function with people driving to it? You just can't fit very many people if they all come in by car. What's the solution?
Well, that's exactly right. And the solution is trying to think of innovative mass transit options, because that is the inhibition. It's not the workplace itself. Many organisations can get a safe workplace. That's the easy part of the equation. The difficult part is how you get to the workplace, as you suggest. Fortunately, we are now experiencing this pandemic in a digital age, when during this time of the Spanish flu that didn't exist. But in a digital age, those CBD communities are able to be functioning to some extent virtually. And I know it's not the same as having the physical buzz of being in a large city and having everything function in the way we're used to. But I'm confident we'll get back to some level of normality, if that means having, spreading out the peak hour to the whole day, if it means changing the hours we work and how we work. But there's no doubt what the facts stand for themselves. All the data we have tells us that people are living and working in close proximity to their home. Shopping, suburb retail in the suburbs has gone up, and no doubt the CBD and larger town centres are suffering. And I think the only way around that problem is a couple of things. Firstly, the nighttime economy, because now we're seeing hospitality venues reopen. There's nothing to stop people venturing out at night when there's greater capacity on the transport network, and with light rail and ferries, which are underutilised at the moment, there is opportunity for us to reinvigorate the nightlife of the large CBD. In terms of workspace, it really comes down to having a safer way to travel. And the health experts advise that if after a certain time we find the mass transit going the way we hope, which is going well, that there may be greater leniency into how many people can safely board a bus and how many people can safely, board a train, but also having people consider breaking up their journey, walking more, cycling more, getting dropped off, getting to work at 11 and leaving at 7 and all those options. So there's ways around it. It doesn't really get us back to the buzz that we had in the CBD, but we're gradually getting there. But there's no doubt it's not even the workplace that's the obstacle. It's getting to the workplace. Apart from lifts, obviously, very tall buildings do have that challenge. Even from my own, I've been working mainly from headquarters in Homebush, where we've got all the COVID-19 headquarters there, but also from my CBD office, and even getting up in the lifts every day is time consuming. So that is a challenge, but it's just time, and I'm hoping in the next few months there'll be positive shifts forward in that regard. But that shouldn't inhibit us from having a good vision about the city and making sure we keep that innovation. That, the first time a few scientists got together a century ago, or people who were in IT got together in groups, was when magic happened. We can still do that digitally. So I don't think that should inhibit our innovation or our ability to think and come up with ideas. But there's no doubt that physical buzz won't be here for a while.
Premier, many questions coming in about climate change. As you would have seen at the end of last year, just before the bushfires, Australia was ranked 61st out of 61 countries on its climate policies. The committee, among many others, has argued that New South Wales can go its own way on this. If the federal government doesn't want to change course, New South Wales could become a global climate leader through its own policies on climate and energy and economic transition. As you lay your strategy for the next phase of the recovery, do you see an opportunity to accelerate the climate transition in New South Wales?
Well, I'm very comfortable, although it's not widely known, I'm very comfortable with our climate change objectives here in New South Wales. I mean, we've already set, net zero emissions targets for 2050, and we're already on the course to delivering that. We have the largest renewable projects in Australia happening here in New South Wales. And we've got a number of projects in the pipeline which will reduce our reliance on high emissions fossil fuels. So I'm really happy and comfortable with the strategy we have in New South Wales, and I think being housebound and the pandemic has made us remember what clean air looks like and how important nature is. And I think this time has really focused people's attention on that. It has reprioritised, though. When you're surviving, your priorities are different to when you're thriving. And we've been surviving the last couple of months. And once we start thriving again, I think those issues will come to the fore again. But it doesn't diminish at all both our I guess, enthusiasm, but also our capacity to deliver against that. If anything, it accelerates it. But I think people appreciate their environment, appreciate what we took for granted before the pandemic. I mean, basic things we took for granted. And I think that will accelerate people's want and also government action in that regard.
Premier, one of the truths about recessions is that when an economy grows back from the recession, it's different. It's changed because not all sectors come back to their former strength. So what ends up in the long run powering a recovery is the growth of new firms and new industries. What needs to be in place to enable the innovation economy and other advanced manufacturing, whatever it is, new sectors to emerge to power the recovery?
I think the question that should be asked is what doesn't need to be in place for that to happen, and that's a lot of regulation. I think we need to be much more open about what we unintentionally have created, which is thwarting innovation. And I think it's really important for us, whether it's through our tax system or whether it's through the various laws and guidelines we have in place, that we minimise our ability to thwart or minimise the risk that an over-regulated environment has on innovation. And I think that's something we need to think about. Traditionally, we've protected a lot of industries, and traditionally we've maintained certain ways of doing things which unintentionally thwart people's ability to take risk and thwart people's ability to change and restructure and be innovative. And I think we need to look at all those things. And certainly, this is probably an example that'll get me in trouble, but because of the legacy of the way we treated the taxi industry, Uber coming in and causing that disruption caused government disruption because of the highly regulated nature of the taxi industry. So that's just one small example of how existing things can thwart innovation in others. And I think we need to think about that and be mindful of that. So certainly I think reducing red tape, reducing unnecessary process, and reducing the number of hands something goes through before a decision is made. So it does mean everyone having greater accountability, a smaller number of people having greater accountability, but I think there's opportunities for us to move more quickly, to have a direct relationship with our citizens, and not rely as heavily on process, which seems to be one thing governments do very well.
A question about local governments. Would you be supportive of uncapping council rates to allow councils to not have to lay off their staffs, to be able to borrow money to fund operations through a recession if need be, or just undertake important local projects?
Well, firstly, we've provided more than $300 million in funding to local government as part of a JobKeeper package for local government. So the state government has funded local government. They don't need to lay off anybody. They don't need to let any jobs go. Secondly, we've accelerated a number of small projects in local government areas and communities to provide that jobs growth. Thirdly, I would not support an unlimited wage, a rate cap restriction. I wouldn't support lifting that, because all that does is discourage good management. Because if a council's not being run well and a council's not managed well, the ratepayers shouldn't have to pay for that. So councils need to live within their means. They shouldn't pay on their own inefficiency and lack of good management onto the citizen. So I would not feel comfortable having a free-for-all on rates. I think councils should look at how they manage themselves, how they can be more efficient, and to be honest, no matter how much you provide local government generally, that they will still want more. And I say that perhaps people will respond cruelly to that comment, but the reality is all of us have to be more efficient. Local government's no different, and all of us can do things better. And I think we should think about reducing the burden on our citizens. How can we do things differently or better, rather than how can we take more from our citizens? So less can be more. So how can we do things differently and better? And how can we improve what we're offering our citizens should be what we ask all the time, not what can we take more from our citizens.
A question about infrastructure. Are there any projects that you believe should be deprioritized, or conversely moved up the priority list?
Well, I think a building equals jobs. Building a project equals jobs. And I'm not about reinventing the wheel. We have a pipeline of in excess of $90 billion over the next 4 years. Hundreds and hundreds of projects we've identified. And I think what's important is for us to send a strong message to the market. And we have, during COVID, construction and infrastructure were sectors which were largely unaffected. So even when we had the restrictions, because we said you can go out to work, we had social distancing in place. Major projects have continued. In fact, they've even accelerated, and some of them are ahead of schedule, because if you don't have traffic and people on the roads, and we've actually relaxed the hours that projects can occur after hours and on weekends, and the public's been very responsive to that and not complained. That won't last forever, but we've managed to ensure those industries continue. And infrastructure equals jobs, infrastructure equals growth, and so if anything, we need to increase and accelerate our infrastructure, not take away from it.
So no changes to be anticipated to the priority list that were in place.
Well, what would you suggest? Every project we've announced has already been through. No, not personally. What's good for the economy?
Yeah.
You can give your personal opinion, Gabrielle. Of course you can.
My personal opinion is that there's a wonderful opportunity to build the cycle network that's planned to be completed in 2056, much sooner than that. And it would create the missing third leg of the stool besides buses, besides public transport and cars. There could be a third option. And by the way, I'm not asking all of...
No. We actually have in excess of $1 billion forecast to build our cycleways, which will have, but I don't know where you got the 2056 number from. I've never heard that before.
Oh, it's it's in the plan.
Oh, okay.
There are, oh my God, I have 50 more questions. This is extraordinary. They're all so interesting, and I'm going through them. Look, a question about what you think is going to happen with population growth and how that affects some of the plans. Obviously, it's pretty hard to move right now from, it's pretty hard to immigrate anywhere in the world. How do you see that playing out, and what does that mean for New South Wales and some of the plans?
Well, I don't think it's any different to what any other nation or state is going through, but no doubt because migration won't occur, and a lot of our population growth was attributed to migration, and Sydney being the largest acceptor of immigrants, that will obviously have a huge impact on us. So it does mean that we need to be more productive, we need to be more innovative to be able to differentiate ourselves in the world. And one thing we have going for us is our workforce isn't as flexible as in places like the United States, but certainly our workforce is one of the most highly educated on the planet. And it's a question about how we can use that to our advantage, how we can, in the era of advanced manufacturing and also IT in the digital world, how can we use our highly educated population to help us drive those industries that previously didn't have much presence in New South Wales. And I think that's really important to do. And so I think we'll be relying on our workforce to be more flexible, to be more innovative, and use that to our advantage. But there's no doubt that, you know, a lack of population growth will hinder our ability to grow our economy. So therefore we need to think about, well, how can we be more productive and how can we be more innovative to mitigate that obvious decline. And I don't see that changing in the near to medium future, Gabrielle. I don't see that. I think it's going to take a while for that sector to bounce back. But also there are opportunities with international students. We're a COVID-safe state. People want to live here and study here. And I think welcoming international students and welcoming those who want to, you know, certain categories of people, even if wide-scale immigration is off the cards for all nations, I think there's other opportunities for us to examine how we can make sure we've already got the best and brightest here anyway, but how can we can engage the best and brightest as well in what we're doing.
Right, there's an extraordinary opportunity now because the world understands just how well governed, how safe Australia is. An extraordinary opportunity for global business and talent attraction and student attraction.
Yeah, definitely. You answered that question better than I did. Thank you.
I'm going to ask just a specific question about business events because quite a few people have asked about it. I'll read this one. The business events industry is hurting. Obviously, in some cases, has gone to zero in terms of international events. And there's a lot of uncertainty about when it can reopen. Can you shed any light on when it will be possible for carefully managed business events at larger sizes to begin to happen again?
I think international events will take a long time to come back, if I can be honest. But I think there's opportunities for us. You know, a lot of people in Australia would be part of events that went overseas. So I think there's an opportunity for us to work on business events through our local population. When I say local population, Australia-wide population. And, you know, I'm confident opening up to New Zealand will give us additional opportunities as well. So there's no doubt the international events management businesses will struggle, but they can convert their activities to be focused within Australia. And I, for one, am one Australian who certainly hasn't seen enough of her country. And I think a lot of people in various industries will feel the same. So there's opportunities for us to develop those events through our wonderful country in places which none of us have heard of or should have visited before now. So for every I guess dead end, there's an opportunity, and I think building that sector up to cater for our population locally and across the ditch is probably where the thinking should be. Because I think it will take some time to have the confidence to host global events here or anywhere else. Mind you, if we're a COVID-safe state and nation, which we are, we could be selective in who we allow to come here, and perhaps earlier than other countries do, because we're regarded as a safe place. But then the question mark for us is, the, you know, tens of thousands of people are welcoming, are they regarded as safe? And there's all those questions to ask, but there's no reason why I think would be an attractive destination now, even post the pandemic, because people have seen how we've dealt with things and how safe we are, that that will give them more confidence when the world does open up. I think we'll be one of the first places to benefit from it.
Absolutely. All right, let me give you a closing comment. I should say that dozens of people have written in to thank you for what you've been doing. So what are you most worried about, and what gives you the most hope?
What gives me the most hope is the way in which I have been literally blown away by how everybody has listened to the advice that's been provided. You know, none of us like to be told what to do. None of us like to change our lives the way in which we've had to. And I've just been so inspired by people from all walks of life, all ages, all situations, coming together and making those personal sacrifices and realising, I for one, and I'm sure everybody else on this Zoom call believes as well, I think we're all a bit stronger than what we thought we were. We're a bit more resilient than what we thought we were. And collectively, we've achieved amazing results. And I don't think that's because of government or anybody else. I think it's because of our citizens who've had the respect and the good knowledge to act in a way in which we've been able to control the virus the way we have. And that's the hope that gives me, that's the hope that I carry in terms of our economic recovery. I think in the same way, we'll be able to dig deep and find ways in which we can do things we never thought about before. And after decades of being locked out of the manufacturing sector because of wages are no longer an inhibition, right? Because innovation and skilled labour and advanced manufacturing have different requirements. And I think it's our time, I really do. I think it's our time to make a difference in the world. And it's our time to think about what we can offer the world and what we can do to enhance the quality of people living in New South Wales.
Okay, Premier, thank you for taking time out of the busiest schedule in the state to talk with us. And thank you for everything you're doing.
Can I thank everybody on the call? I haven't had a chance to thank or see people personally, but all of you are leaders in your industry, your businesses, or cultural institutions, and have a passion about Sydney, which we all share. And I just want to thank you for doing what you're doing and for being leaders and showing the way. So thank you for the opportunity.
All right, everyone, we'll see you on the next edition of Committee for Sydney Live. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.